Seasoned horror movie fans should know not to take any character, no matter how innocent they may seem, at face value, because there's always the chance, even the slightest chance, that they might actually be the secret killer hidden in plain sight. And yet, all of the following characters were all presented as meek, harmless, even affable or genuinely likable enough to fool us into believing them. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 horror movie characters you trusted but shouldn't have. Number 10, Laurie Spengler, Happy Death Day. One of the few genuinely likable characters in Happy Death Day is protagonist Tree's roommate Laurie, who only has a small role in the bulk of the film, but appears to be a genuinely kind person, even making Tree a cupcake for her birthday. So, she couldn't be the killer then, right? I mean, killers don't make cupcakes, do they? Well, unless they're laced with poison, but surely not. Well, after Tree deduces that the killer trapping her in a time loop is actually a serial killer called John Toombs, she kills him and seemingly breaks the cycle. She then celebrates by finally eating the cupcake that Laurie made for her, something she hadn't done in any previous loop, but to her surprise again wakes up at the very start of the time loop. This causes her to realize that Toombs was actually just a red herring, and the killer has been Laurie all along, who gave her a poisoned cupcake. The reason for this? Well, the doctor Laurie was having an affair with was also having an affair with Tree, who he favored, turning Laurie jealously murderous. Number 9, Max Lawrence, The Lost Boys. On an initial viewing of The Lost Boys, most surely assume that the master vampire is David Powers, and even if not, they surely didn't peg the unassuming video store owner Max Lawrence to be the real big bad. And that's partly because actor Edward Herrmann had such an approachable, disarming presence as a performer that even though Sam and the Frog Brothers do suspect him of being the head honcho earlier in the film, it does genuinely feel like they're just mistaken. But then, at the very end of the movie, Max finally shows his true colors, as his demeanor suddenly shifts to something far more sinister following David's death, as he creepily outs himself to the heroes as the master vampire. Edward Herrmann's performance is so terrific in the movie that we absolutely buy him as both a totally boring normal guy and then the ferocious master vampire. Number 8, Jill Roberts, Scream 4. Given that the third Scream movie literally had the Ghostface killer be Sidney's stepbrother Roman, fans probably should have put Sid's niece Jill Roberts under some additional scrutiny in Scream 4. But with pre-release rumors indicating that Scream 4 was going to be a soft reboot of sorts for the franchise, it was easy to believe that Jill, who frankly had Final Girl written all over her, would basically be the new Sidney. And so suspicion was quite ingeniously cast away from her towards a glut of more likely suspects. Only for the third act to reveal that, indeed, Jill was one of the film's 2 Ghostface killers, and the primary one no less. It's a credit to Emma Roberts' performance that she's absolutely persuasive as both the vulnerable, pre-reveal Jill and her psychotic post-unmasking true self, and that both of the 2 sides of the character still feel of a piece with one another. All the same though, after Scream 3 flat out told us not to take Sid's relatives at face value, we probably should have known better than to trust that Jill wouldn't get stab happy. Number 7, Luke Lerner, Better Watch Out. Where horror movies are concerned, whoever expects the apparently imperiled child? Well, the Christmas-themed psychological horror Better Watch Out centers around a babysitter called Ashley who must defend a 12-year-old Luke and his friend Garrett from a home invasion. Garrett is apparently shot dead early on, but midway through the film, it's revealed to be one of the intruders, whereupon Ashley realizes that there was no home invasion at all, and the entire setup was a ploy orchestrated by Luke to rescue Ashley, who he has feelings for. At this point, Luke knocks Ashley out, and he and Garrett both hold her and her boyfriend Ricky hostage in the house. The film ends with Luke framing Ashley's ex Jeremy for the deaths as his parents return home and alert the authorities, but Ashley is revealed to have survived Luke's attempt to kill her, suggesting she'll then alert the police to who the real killer is. Number 6, Rose Armitage, Get Out. Rose Armitage did a frankly fantastic job of throwing suspicion off herself completely at the start of Get Out, given that the opening sequence shows her challenging a police officer who excessively quizzes her black boyfriend Chris. The audience then is led to believe that Rose will absolutely be on Chris's side. But once the proverbial hits the fan and Chris realizes he's in genuine danger at the hands of Rose's family, she too drops all pretenses. See, it isn't only her family who are kidnapping black men in order to hijack their bodies for their own nefarious purposes. In fact, Rose is totally in on it as well, and has effectively been dating victims to lure them to the family home and facilitate these kidnappings. As for why Rose pushed back against the cop, well, she didn't care about Chris at all. She actually wanted to avoid leaving a paper trail which could identify Chris's whereabouts. Number 5, Edwin, Predators. If Spider-Man 3 proved anything, it's that it's tough to take Topher Grace seriously as a murderous villain, which teed up his casting in 2010's Predators quite nicely. See, Grace appears in the film as Edwin, a doctor who is seemingly completely out of place amongst the movie's cast of killers and all-around garden variety psychopaths. See, everything about Edwin, including the backstory he tells, suggests that he's a relatively harmless, buffoonish guy. Basically the least threatening character in the movie by a country mile. And so it comes as quite a shock when he eventually reveals himself to have far more in common with his marooned comrades than expected, as he was actually a serial killer back on Earth and intends to stay on this murderous planet. While there are absolutely hints to Edwin's true nature which become more obvious on repeat viewings, on that initial watch, Topher Grace brings such a wouldn't hurt a fly quality to the role that, combined with his inherent likability as an actor, it's tough to peg him as a cloak and dagger killer. Number 4, Cecily Moore, Werewolves Within. An easy way for filmmakers to cast suspicion away from a villainous character is make them as adorable and charming as possible. And there's a good chance that most folks watching Werewolves Within were positively smitten with Cecily Moore, the chirpy, dry-witted mail carrier who helps Forest Ranger Finn Wheeler investigate werewolf attacks in a sleepy Vermont town. But Cecily's appealing personality merely provides the perfect smokescreen and keep her secret villainy concealed in plain sight. Alas, the third act sees Cecily finally reveal that she has been the werewolf all along, and scheme to have the town's citizens start killing one another in their paranoia, in turn providing her with easy food. And no, there's no sentimental sub-story or miraculous turnaround for her either. She remains a murderous antagonist with a capital A all the way to the end of the movie, revealing she didn't really harbor any feelings for Finn at all before attempting to kill him. Number 3, Mrs. Collins' Last Night in Soho. Edgar Wright's Last Night in Soho marked the final screen appearance for the great Diana Rigg, and audiences were largely just happy to see her one final time without putting too much thought into the nature of her role. In the flick though, Rigg plays Ellie's landlady Mrs. Collins, and seemingly was quite perfectly cast in the small but memorable role of the surly old woman. But late in the film, we actually learn that Mrs. Collins was in fact an elderly version of Sandy, and that in her younger days, Sandy became a serial killer who targeted the men that she was pimped out to. Worse still, she stashed their corpses in the walls and under the floorboards of the house that Ellie's now in. Sandy then attempts to kill Ellie with poison, though Ellie is ultimately able to escape and leave Sandy to burn to death in a fire that she accidentally started, as Sandy preferred to burn than face prison. Evidently, Wright quite shrewdly exploited the audience's fondness for Diana Rigg and the belief that she'd simply be playing a fairly unimportant supporting role to actually have her portray a most unexpected antagonist. Number 2, Spence Park's Resident Evil. Even though Resident Evil Spence was a wisecracking amnesiac with a serious attitude problem, he was ruggedly likable enough that few had him pegged as the film's secret villain. After all, in a movie where our heroes are facing off against an undead apocalypse and the Umbrella Corporation's murderous AI known as the Red Queen, why be suspicious of any additional human characters? Well, the movie's third act twist reveals that Spence is the one who intentionally released the T-virus into Umbrella's research facility, the Hive, in an attempt to destroy the facility while allowing him to sneak a sample of the zombie-transforming virus out and sell it on the black market. Basically, Spence was responsible for the whole ass outbreak. And considering that his first name is literally one letter removed from Spencer, as in Oswell E. Spencer and the Spencer Mansion, the latter being the setting for the first game, and the former being one of the video game series' primary antagonists, his untrustworthiness probably should have been a little more obvious. All the same, he managed to effortlessly trick audiences with his handsomely snarky ways, and eventually got torn apart by a licker for his trouble. Number 1. Blaire Lilly, Unfriended. There's no upfront reason not to root for Unfriended's protagonist Blaire Lilly, who, along with her friends, is being terrorized by the ghost of her childhood best friend, Laura Barnes, who a year prior killed herself after an embarrassing video of her went viral. Laura soon starts using her supernatural abilities to kill off the friends one by one, all the while revealing their deepest, darkest secrets to one another. In Blaire's case, Laura reveals that she cheated on her boyfriend with his best friend, which, yeah, while certainly a shoddy indication of her character, likely doesn't lead audiences to figure out the bigger reveal about Blaire, and why she's ultimately kind of a villainous character. See, ultimately Blaire ends up getting both her boyfriend and the best friend killed while trying to save herself, before an extended version of the viral video reveals that Blaire was the one who recorded it and in turn contributed to Laura's suicide. And it's at this point where most of all of the audience's sympathy for Blaire evaporates, and when Laura attacks and presumably kills her in the movie's final moments, it's tough to feel that bad for her. So that's our list. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. What did you think about these horror movie villain reveals? And are there any other ones that blindsided you? Let me know, and while you're down there, if you could, please give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to What Culture Horror for more lists and news like this on the regular. Even if you don't though, I've been Josh. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.